Thank you. Madam Speaker, this is about a Prime Minister who wanted to do a favour for a friend. He wanted to do a favour in the form of allowing them off the hook. In order to do this favour for his friends, he needed to first strong-arm the Attorney General into doing the dirty work for him. You see, she stood in his way between the action of justice and the action of injustice, the action of maintaining integrity and the action of polluting our justice system. Madam Speaker, the Attorney General faithfully stood in that passageway and she resisted the strong-arming movements of the Prime Minister, his attempt to manipulate her, to facilitate his desire rather than uphold justice. Now, we are talking about the Prime Minister of Canada. This is a leader on the world stage. This is an individual in whom Canadians have placed a great deal of trust. Madam Speaker, this is an individual in whom we have placed the responsibility of guiding our country. And instead of stewarding this place of trust and responsibility, he has actually abused his position of power. So why should Canadians care? They should care because Trudeau, when he ran for election, the Prime Minister made a series of promises, and they were right promises, Madam Speaker. He said that we needed to be open and honest, and he promised that his government would do that. The Prime Minister promised that he would let the light shine in, that he would be more open, more transparent. He said, and I quote, "It is important that we acknowledge mistakes when we make them." At another time, he said this, actually in the Attorney General's mandate letter as the Justice Minister, he said to her, "I expect you to ensure that our initiatives respect the Constitution of Canada, that they respect court decisions and are in keeping with our proudest legal traditions." He went on to say, "We have committed to an open, honest government that is accountable to Canadians, lives up to the highest ethical standards, and applies the utmost care and prudence in the handling of public funds. I, the Prime Minister, expect you to embody these values in your work and observe the highest ethical standards in everything you do." The Prime Minister asked his Attorney General to abide by these principles. She did. He did not. Now she is the one that is being silenced. The Prime Minister also said during his election run, he said this, "Sunny ways, my friends, sunny ways. This is what positive politics can do." So, Madam Speaker, those of us here on the side of opposition are asking the Prime Minister to abide by his words. Sunny ways. Why aren't we allowing the sun to shine in? Why are we not allowing the details to come forward? Why are we not giving the former Attorney General of Canada the opportunity to share her story? Madam Speaker, this matters to Canadians because in the same way that they have the opportunity, I dare say the privilege, to elect their officials, they also have the responsibility to hold them accountable. Now, of course, those of us on the side of opposition share that responsibility with Canadians. We too will hold this government to account. We too will in fact insist that the truth be told, which to date it has not been. So let's look more closely at what happened, and to do so, let us look at a number of voices that have been shared. Starting with the former Attorney General herself. She said this. She said, "For a period of time, approximately 4 months between September and December 2018, that she experienced consistent and sustained effort by many people within the government to seek to politically interfere in the exercise of prosecutorial discretion in my role as the Attorney General of Canada in an inappropriate effort to secure a deferred prosecution agreement with SNC-Lavalin." She went on to talk about multiple phone calls, multiple emails, multiple text messages, multiple meetings that were held to try to pressure her. Madam Speaker, she goes on to talk about veiled threats that were issued toward her. Now, this all came out during her initial testimony to the committee. She also said, she stressed she said that the Prime Minister stressed that there was an election taking place in Quebec, and therefore she needed to do this. She needed to do the Prime Minister's dirty work. Interesting. What we have here is a case of sustained and inappropriate pressure. We have an issue an issue where the Prime Minister actually bullied the former Attorney General into trying to persuade her or get her to do his dirty work. As a result, then, we know that the former Attorney General got fired from her post as the Attorney General and moved into a different cabinet post and then eventually resigned from there. Now, the Prime Minister would try to convince Canadians that two different experiences were had, that her interpretation is simply wrong. But, Madam Speaker, why will we not legitimize her voice? Is this not what the Prime Minister has advocated for all this time? That we would listen to the women among us. In particular, I would hope that we would listen to the former Attorney General of Canada, which I might add is the very first Indigenous female Attorney General that this country has seen. Why would we not listen to her voice? Why would we not give it weight? Now, the Prime Minister, that didn't work, and so he decided that he would try another excuse, and that was, he said, well, it has to do with jobs. It has to do with protecting 9,000 jobs that exist within this company, SNC-Lavalin. But we know now that that's not true either. The CEO of the company actually has come forward and said that's not the case at all. He actually never said that to the Prime Minister. Well, that's one voice then, the Attorney General of Canada, and of course the Prime Minister has tried to squash her voice. So out came another voice, and that is the voice of Gerald Butts, the Chief Advisor to the Prime Minister. His voice said, "I quit." He walked out. Interesting. Then came another voice, the voice of the honourable member, the President of the Treasury Board. And she too said, "I resign." But she wrote a letter with her resignation, and in her letter she said this. She said, "The solemn principles at stake are the independence and integrity of our justice system. It is a fundamental doctrine of the rule of law that our Attorney General should not be subjected to political pressure or interference regarding the exercise of her prosecutorial discretion in criminal cases. Sadly," she goes on to say, "I have lost confidence in how the government has dealt with this matter and in how it has responded to the issues raised." She then finished her letter by saying there can be a cost to acting on one's principles, but there is a bigger cost to abandoning them. She couldn't be more correct. So now we have three voices in the mix. But then there was a fourth. The clerk of the Privy Council also tendered his resignation. Then the member of Whitby, just today, she also resigned. She resigned and shared her story of also being bullied by the Prime Minister. She shared a story of the Prime Minister calling her up and yelling at her over the phone. In fact, so loudly that her husband could overhear the entire conversation. Madam Speaker, this does not speak of a Prime Minister who deeply cares about wanting to serve his country. This does not speak well of a Prime Minister claiming to be a feminist. Madam Speaker, let's look at this. He has 3 female members who have all resigned from their posts, who have left, who have shed light on the fact that this Prime Minister has mistreated them. Let's look at another set of voices, shall we? Let's look at the media. They have said it's fair to say it's a constitutional crisis. A former judge said that in an article. The former Ontario Attorney General said it opens the door to prosecuting enemies of the government and giving immunity to its friends, which is despotic. The Toronto Star said it is going to be impossible to look at Justin Trudeau's government the same way again. And the National Post said it sounded and felt like a death knell for the Liberal government of Justin Trudeau. There is plenty of commentary out there.
The honourable member just mentioned the Prime Minister by name, and
it doesn't matter. Okay, I apologize.
So 10 seconds, so please wrap up.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. These are a number of voices on the table, Madam Speaker. They have been heard. But there is one voice that is incomplete, and that is the voice of the former Attorney General. Today, we are asking that this place give permission for her to speak. In particular, we are asking that the Prime Minister lift the muzzle.
Hear, hear.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
I thank the member from Lethbridge for contributions today and just point out a couple of clarifications before my question. The first is that, as an exception, only the fourth time in history since 1987, cabinet confidence was waived, and absolutely unprecedented solicitor-client privilege was waived to allow the former Attorney General to speak. That's first point. Secondly, when she actually spoke, she said, on the record, nothing that happened was unlawful, nothing that happened was criminal, and she said, in fact, that the state of our institutions and the rule of law is intact. I'm quoting. She said, quote, "I do not want members of this committee or Canadians to think that the integrity of our institutions has somehow evaporated. The integrity of our justice system, the integrity of the Director of Public Prosecutions and prosecutors is intact," end quote. That's the former Attorney General. Given that evidence, and given that there is a desire from the opposition to actually get to the root of the matter, I put it to the member opposite that the Ethics Commissioner is doing an investigation where they have powers to summon witnesses, have them put under oath, given evidence, and producing documents. In this manner, they have the same powers as a court of record. Isn't that the best venue for seeking the actual answers that the opposition clamours in this case?
The honourable member for Lethbridge.
In her letter written on March 14th, the former Attorney General said this. She said, "These matters are still unfolding and further clarity and information is needed. As in other places around the globe, our democratic institutions and norms, including the rule of law and prosecutorial independence, are under pressure. Collectively and as individuals, we are challenged, therefore, to respond." She went on to say, but you were paying attention, or she went on to then say that there is more to be shared, that there is more to her testimony, that there is more that happened after she stepped down as the Attorney General of Canada. Madam Speaker, she's asked for permission to share the remainder of her testimony, and the Prime Minister is refusing her the opportunity to do so. Now, the Justice Committee has brought forward multiple motions asking that the former Attorney General of Canada be allowed to speak. And the Justice Committee, the Liberal members of the Justice Committee, have shut them down over and over and over again. So to answer the opposite member's question, is it the most appropriate place to hear? Sure. So why don't they let her speak?
Hear, hear, hear.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Skeena-Balclay Valley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I wish I could say it was a pleasure to join this debate, but there's nothing that gives me pleasure in watching a government who's actually performing quite a rare feat, because oftentimes with a political scandal, we can watch the scandal unfold as this one has over a number of weeks, and the original sin becomes eclipsed by the actions that follow the original sin. And Canadians don't like the cover-up. They don't like the lies heaped upon lies. This government's accomplished something where the original sin and the cover-up of that sin might be equally detrimental to people's faith in politics and certainly their faith in this Prime Minister. My question for my friend is very specific. First of all, cabinet confidentiality has been waived a number of times in Canadian history. So the Liberals pulling a muscle, patting themselves on the back for the partial allowance of the former Attorney General to speak deserves little credit. They just now claimed, the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Justice claimed that the stature of our justice system remains strong. Well, that's not for a lack of effort from this Prime Minister and his office to undermine the independence of our judiciary. My question to my friend is this. If the former Attorney General had succumbed to that sustained pressure that she talked about and inappropriate that she also talked about, what would be the effect on the independence of our courts and the ability of Canadians to believe that there is one set of laws for all people, not one for everyone and one for the well and well-connected?
The honourable member for Lethbridge.
I think that's exactly what's at stake here. We have the Prime Minister of Canada who tried to strong-arm the former Attorney General of Canada into giving special favours or administering special favours to the Prime Minister's friends, SNC-Lavalin. If we were to give in to a system like this, if the former Attorney General of Canada had given in to the Prime Minister's demands, it would result in a justice system that is forever compromised. A justice system where there would be one set of rules for the wealthy, the rich, the powerful, the elite, and then there would be another set of rules for those who do not fit within that category. Madam Speaker, that is not the Canada in which we live, nor is it the Canada in which we should want to live. And so I commend the former Attorney General for taking the stand that she did, and I do believe that she should be given every opportunity to speak her truth.
Resuming debate.